So hi everyone, thank you Barbara for that introduction. As Barbara said, I am Evan Hector and I'm the Haematology Service Manager here at UK NEQAS. And yes, I'm going to talk you through our instrument grouping process for EQA performance assessment. Now, in this presentation, I'm going to look at the purpose of EQA, the importance of instrument grouping, and we do get a lot of questions from our participants about instrument grouping. So I thought it'd be really great to kind of talk you through that process and give you an insight and an understanding into kind of how we look at it and the things that we need to consider when we are thinking about what groups to put instruments into. I'm going to talk about how we group, and as I said, what we consider when we're looking at groupings, and what happens when performance appears to go wrong. And also then what we consider, what can be considered to help you work through any performance issues that you observe. So EQA plays a vital role in maintaining the high standards required for accurate and reliable lab testing. It is essential for effective patient care and for you to know that you're working to the standard that you believe that you're working to. It's also a crucial component in the lab and clinical testing, and it aims to ensure the accuracy, reliability, and consistency of test results across different labs. So the primary purpose of EQA, and this includes quality assurance, so it helps labs to verify that their testing procedures are producing accurate and reliable results. It allows you to identify and correct any potential issues or errors in your process. We can look at benchmarking. So by participating in EQA programs, labs can compare performance with other labs. This can help identify areas for improvement and ensure that your results are in line with your peers. We've got regularity compliance. So many regulatory bodies and accreditation organizations do require participation in EQA programs, depending where you are in the world, as part of your certification process. And regular participation demonstrates your commitment to maintaining high standards within your working organization. Training and development. So EQA provides an opportunity for lab staff to learn and improve their skills, and the feedback from EQA programs can be used for training purposes and to ensure and enhance the competence of lab staff. You can use it to detect systematic errors, so it helps to provide in identifying these errors that might be evident within the lab's internal quality control processes. And this early detection can also prevent incorrect results from affecting patient care. Looking at continuous improvement, EQA is a tool that can be used to regularly assess performance and making the necessary adjustments where you can improve your processes and outcomes over time. And it also helps to build trust. So participation in EQA programs enhances the credibility and trustworthiness of your lab, both with patients and other healthcare providers, by showing that your lab does meet the expected standards. So effective quality assurance requires IQC, so the everyday analytical process of detecting analytical errors within the lab to ensure both the reliability and accuracy of test results. We've got the EQA, where the overall accuracy and comparability of results between labs may be determined. And we've got inter-lab comparison, where it's necessary for accreditation to ISO 15189. So why have different instrument groups? So we can use it for pair grouping, and it can be necessary because the survey material is stabilized, and although the target values are clinically comparable between groups, the material may not be commutable for all parameters. So UK NEQAS, we work with manufacturers and advisors to monitor our instrument groups, and ideally we want to have a minimum of 20 instruments to form a pair group for the purpose of valid statistical analysis, but this may be varied at the discretion of the scheme, depending on the instrument group, the instrument type, and the program that we're looking at. So the importance of instrument groups, we're looking at standardization of instrument groups here, and the importance here is to ensure that testing procedures are standardized across different labs. So this would lead to consistent and reliable results. When we're looking at quality assurance, lab can assess the accuracy and precision of their instruments, helping to maintain high quality testing standards. For performance monitoring, instrument groups can provide a means for labs to monitor their performance of their instruments over time, identifying any issues or deviations that may arise. And it also, sorry, just go back one, it gives confidence building. So being part of instrument group does instill confidence in the reliability and accuracy of instruments and their testing abilities. So overall, instrument groups is essential for ensuring the reliability, accuracy and credibility of lab testing processes. So what do we do when it looks like things aren't working as we expect them to do? So here is an example where the performance of an instrument led us to ask what may have gone wrong with the analysis of our UK NEQAS EQA samples, leading to us just investigating this process. So in August 2021, we found that we had a varying white cell counts and differential performance on the Horiba Umizen 500 and 550 instruments. Now, here's a screenshot, and I'm hoping you can see this okay, because it's quite a widespread. So this is a screenshot of the performance review from one of our FB surveys, where we observed a higher than expected CV for the white cell count on our sample FB1. And just to note, the grayed out figures are the figures that would have been naturally trimmed during our statistical analysis program. Now, as you can see here, we've got a spread of data from 0.6 to 5.84, and you can see where I circled there's these red figures that these are the ones that we highlighted in the group where participants seem to obtain significantly different results from the results from the rest of the participation group. And you can see again the same difference was observed in our DL program. With our DL program, this is commercially obtained material. So we do obtain a certificate of analysis with this material. And when we looked at the certificate of analysis, we were able to ascertain which participants seem to be obtaining the correct results. And as you can see from the top of this screen, for example, DL1, the target was 2.73 for the group, but when we looked at the target range, it was 2.51 to 3.07. And then you'll see the highlighted results in red. We know that these were the results, or these are the participants that were very much out of consensus with what we were expected to get back from that material. So our first action was to speak to Horiba about our observations. So we identified that when we had spoken to Horiba, that their engineers had instructed participants to analyze the FB EQA material via the EQA mode. Now, there was a good reason for this, given that the engineers' observations of how the material was being analyzed on the machines and also their expertise. So it made sense that they would say to participants, run it through the EQA mode. However, we at UK NEQAS, weren't aware of this instruction, and also we were providing our instructions that were then contradictory to what Horiba engineers were telling the participants. So therefore, we now had participants now returning results via the EQA mode and participants running through the patient mode as we had been instructing them to. So you can see now we have a dilemma here, which on the surface appeared to be an easy fix. So you get everyone to follow the EQA, the UK NEQAS instructions. And the logic there being that if everyone's doing the same thing, if it is wrong, they shouldn't affect their performance because everyone is doing the same thing. But this is not what we observed. So in October 2021, we emailed the Umizen 500 and 550 users to obtain their instrument plots for our survey 2110 FB. So we asked them to analyze the FB and DL EQA material in the normal patient mode as per our instructions. And we also asked them to analyze the FB EQA specimens in the QC mode and the DL EQA specimens in the QC and NEQAS QC modes, which were relevant on their machine, to enable us to perform a review of the results obtained from the patient's mode via the results obtained from the QC mode. So then in February 2022, I then emailed Hariba to inform that we were still observing this widespread of results. As I said, logically, if everyone's doing the same thing, we should expect everyone to obtain the same result. And we could not explain why we were continuous to see this difference when we were making sure everyone was doing the same thing. So then I reviewed this with the scheme director, and we agreed to ask the Umazon 500 and 550 users to run their specimens in the proposed EQC mode for the next resurvey. So that would have been from April to June in 20. So that was the 2204 FB, 2205 FB, and 2206 FB surveys. I also plan to create a separate instruction sheet to facilitate this in conjunction with Hariba. And when Hariba had replied to us about this, they also asked, because they informed us that the machines were on different software versions and for these analyzers, and they proposed that for example, the H500 users, they had some users were on software version 2.2.2, so those were to run the EQA samples in the EQC control mode. Then we had some H500 users who were on software version that was before version 2.2.2. So we asked them to run the EQA samples in the patient mode. And then the H550 users were to run the EQA samples in the control mode. And then in February 2022, the instructions were provided for the instruments on the specific software versions as I've described. The Umazon H500 and 550 instruments were also moved into separate instrument groups. So prior to February 2022, they were being performance assessed together. And because we saw these differences in their performance and then the knowledge of them being on different software versions, we did take the decision, along with consultation with our scheme advisors, to separate them into different instrument groups and then to then monitor to see if this did improve the situation. So in July 2023, it was noted that the outer consensus performance did improve at 2304 FB, 05 FB, 06 FB, and also at 2201 DL and 2202 DL, with less participants returning results that differed from the majority of the group and target mean. However, this was not the case for 2303 DL. At that time, Hariba mentioned that there were still sites that had software version upgrade from 2.1.0 to version 2.2.2, but these sites had not been instructed to run the samples as we had asked them to. So therefore, they had been running samples using version 2.2.2 as they had previously run them using version 2.1.0. I'm hoping you're following all of that because it does get a bit complicated, but it really does show how important it is for us to kind of really be able to assess when we see things going wrong, to not just simply go, oh, we're going to change instrument groups, but to really drill down and assess and identify what's happening so that we can work it out and then provide the correct instructions to help rectify the situation. So thanks to the collaboration with Hariba and the patience and compliance of our participants, towards the end of 2023, we did start to see an improvement in the performance of the Umazon 500 and 550 instruments. So when we're looking at performance and when it appears to go wrong, there are a couple of things that actually you as participants and in conjunction with us at UK NEQAS that we can look at to see and identify where things have gone wrong. So for example, when you've got a high DI, things that you can look at is, or we can look at, is excluding pre-analytical blunders. So as you saw when I provided the spread of data in the previous slides, when we're looking at high CVs, for example, when we're going through our statistical analysis process, I will then go and look at the spread of data. And it's the same when participants email me saying they're concerned about the high DI. I tend to go back, look at their performance, look at what's happening with the group, and I can look at the spread of data to see actually were there any additional erroneous results, for example, that weren't actually trimmed through the natural process. And those might be ones that we want to then further exclude and then rerun the stats on. So as I mentioned, we would then exclude specimen quality. Sorry, we also then want to look at excluding any specimen quality concerns. So we can go back and look at our data, making sure that actually everything was all right in terms of our material processes. We'll also might ask participants to just clarify and verify how they've stored the samples, how they've run them, and if they've run them as per our instructions. Another thing to look at is checking the analyte concentration and its significance. So low analyte levels, we particularly see this with low platelet counts. They can give a higher DI as performance from modern analyzers is tight, and a very small difference from the target mean can result in a higher DI. And we do, we always encourage people to look at their performance over time, over the last 3 surveys, 6 specimens, because it's, we want to, we're not looking at necessarily looking at performance at that time, although it is important to make sure we're not missing anything in that performance at that survey, but we don't overly get concerned at high DIs at that point, because we want to look at their overall performance and see how people are doing over a spread of time. We also want to look at if bias is evident of both samples, because there could be a systemic error. So it's checking the IQC. Is that performance in line with what you're seeing with your IQC? Because you can see trends and biases be the same with your EQA result as you can see with your IQC. Is there trends in the analytical performance scores, and is there trends in the patient results? Because a lot of participants come back being concerned about their performance when they get a high DI. However, if they're not concerned with the results they're getting for patient results, we then tend to encourage them to say that their machines are okay, and just to keep monitoring the EQA with us as we go along. There can be large changes and variations DI and change in biases possible due to random errors. So again, checking the IQC, check your maintenance reagents and other changes, and check operator training as well. Sometimes, and we've seen it happen where new staff have come in and they haven't necessarily read the instructions correctly, so they're not necessarily running the results, for example, the samples, for example, in the right mode. So that's always a good thing to go back to make sure actually the person handling the sample does know what they're doing in line with our instructions. And then, as I said, to always continue to monitor, because it's important to note that 1 in 20 results will be outside of the 2 standard SD. So again, looking at your, we will expect to see high DIs over time, and it's good to look at your performance over time, over the last 6 specimens, to see, how you're trending and how you're performing over that time period. So we can run comparisons with other instruments and sites to satisfy yourselves that your machines are also working as expected. We'd always advise contacting us for advice. So depending on timings and stock, we can send repeat samples for you to repeat analysis on. Myself, the service manager or the scheme director, will review and offer advice on your observations and performance over the last 3 surveys. We do also contact manufacturers because you can contact the manufacturers yourself. They will never suggest calibrating your instruments based on EQA performance. However, they can look at your instrument plots and be able just to determine that actually, no, they're happy with the performance of the machine, or there might be something they just want to kind of review or advise you to contact us about as well, so that we can look at with you. We at UK NEQAS always collaborate very closely with manufacturers wherever possible, as this is also a benefit to our services and to you as our participants. And we may contact manufacturers on your behalf with your permission also when we're looking at performance queries. This is not a kind of a step-by-step linear approach to the actions, and some of these actions can be taken simultaneously at the same time. So UK NEQAS largely group the instruments as advised by manufacturers in conjunction with and what we observe with the statistical data. So we do see performance issues. Sorry, where we do see performance issues, we will contact the manufacturer in the first instance to determine if there are any recommendations that they may offer. And this also may mean that instrument groups will be changed on the basis based based on this, as there may be a number of things that we need to consider under the guidance of UK NEQAS scheme advisors to determine the appropriate action to demonstrate that we are just presenting everything in the way that we would like to present it in. So just to be aware, as I said, we may not make instrument group changes straight away, so it can take some time, but we do like to be able to have the consultation with our scheme advisors and also investigate the data. And sometimes we might need to do a bit more evaluation on it. So we might ask you just to help us out by, like we did with the Umazon groups, running samples through different modes and collecting that data so that we can just kind of fully investigate the situation and work through our any action plans that we want to implement. So finding information, you can find additional information in our participants manual, and Dr. Barbara De La Salle also has done a presentation about troubleshooting haematology EQA in April 2021, and this does provide clarification on experience with EQA interpretation, as well as information for troubleshooting EQA performance that you might find helpful, and you can find the link here. So I'd like to just take the time to thank the team at Hariba Medical, who were all instrumental in helping us work through this issue that we found a few years ago, and also to Dr. De La Salle and our UK NEQAS Haematology Scientific team, particularly for all their hard work in the background to just make sure everything ran smoothly for you and our participants. I would also like to take the moment to acknowledge the recent passing of a dear colleague at Hariba, who was, as I mentioned, instrumental in us working through this observation.
Well, thank you very much, Yvonne. I'm sure everyone will agree that this was a very thought-provoking talk. It is instrument grouping is always a challenge, especially in haematology. I'm sure it is in all EQA disciplines, but in haematology, most of our modern analyzers are just they're large, very, very complex algorithms that take small variations in counting and electronic signals and then convert them into something that we all recognize as from the days when maybe we just used spectrophotometers and microhematocrit centrifuges and counting chambers. I'm possibly the only person old enough to remember doing haematology that way, but it's still it was how it all started. But the modern instruments give us so much more and so much faster. Now we've got a couple of questions, Yvonne, if you're okay to take those. And obviously, if anybody does have any other questions, I would, please do put them into the Q&A function. Now, the first question is from an anonymous attendee, which is, do you recommend that we, i.e. the participant, contact you, i.e. us UK NEQAS, for a high DI for a single parameter if the performance score is less than 100? I will also say to participants, Yvonne and I actually share the same office, so we have to do a bit of a tag team on the mute button. So please do have some patience with us if we miss the pass of the baton.
So I have two thoughts on that question. One, my first thought is actually we always encourage people to contact us, because I think if participants are concerned, we're more than happy to look through the data with them. I think it's not always necessary to. again, this is where it's going through your own checklist. I think it's good for participants to have, as part of their EQA review, a checklist on things that they look at internally to satisfy themselves that actually they may have a high D out of performance, and yes, your score is less than 100, but you're happy that your machines are working okay. So for example, looking at your IQC, is your IQC, so if you've got a negative bias, for example, in your EQA return that has resulted you in getting this high DI, has your IQC got that same negative bias? So if it has, then you know actually your machines are performing as expected. If it hasn't, that might be the prompt that to say, I'm going to just contact UK NEQAS to just get some further advice on this. As I said, we're always happy for people to contact, and I'd rather people contact us beforehand, before their scores go above 100, because we can help to troubleshoot any queries or issues that you believe you're having before they go over 100, and before Barbara has to write to you with your performance issues. So I hope that does answer it. But as I said, we're always happy for you to contact us in the first instance anyway, and we can work it through with you. But if you look at your machines and you feel that your machines are working okay, then there isn't that need to contact us.
So what else do you consider, and this again is from an anonymous attendee, what else do you consider when deciding whether instruments should have their own instrument group?
So we're looking at technology, and numbers. So are there enough numbers to have an instrument group is one of the primary questions we're going to ask, because if there isn't enough numbers, we're not able to perform the statistical analysis on them. If there are enough numbers, then we're also looking at the instrument type, technology. So sometimes people think that because it's just one that particular instrument, that should be in a group, but that if they're similar instrument, other manufacturers with the same technology, we tend to have them in the same group. So therefore we would look at that carefully with the manufacturers, because then I go back and tend to ask for the manufacturer's advice on that, and then we'll also look at it in line with our scheme advisors. So we'll kind of, as I said, look at the numbers, look at the type, talk to the manufacturers, and also do some kind of investigation work within ourselves, because we can look at the data internally and see actually if keeping the groups to the machines in that one particular group or separating them, will their performance be effective either way, whichever way we do it? So as I said, there are a number of things that we would look at, and it does take time. I think the important thing to do to kind of relay is that this is not an instant thing. We do, try to look at this very carefully and look at all aspects of it before we make decisions. So it can take a few months before a decision is made, and therefore notifying our participants on what actions we're going to take.
Yes, thank you, Yvonne. Because there is, I mean, obviously, we've done this for some years, and I would also add that there is very much, there is a degree of empirical process in this, because we have to see what the performance is like. We also sometimes find when a new instrument comes onto the market that it's difficult to understand the grouping, what needs to be done. We do try to work with manufacturers in advance. We try to pre-test material with instruments before they are actually become available on the market. So we do work with the manufacturers, and sometimes we note we make particular observations about performance, which then resolve either because the number of instruments in the group increases to give us a more robust data, or otherwise I don't know. Sometimes I think that manufacturers may well be able to do, and I would be careful here, but they may actually be able to do some adjustments or what have you. We did notice when a major new instrument manufacturer or a major new instrument line came on the market, probably more than 5 years ago now, that we initially had a lot of problems with red cell parameters, which then completely resolved. Now that could have been a reagent lot, it could have been a minor tweak to software, it could have been some changes to calibration, but it resolved itself. So there often needs to be an element of patience when new instruments are launched onto the market. I would also say, however, it's not always down to the EQA material. We have in the past had situations where we've noted changes, and this was particular with a reagent preparation procedure, where we started to see a deviation in EQA, which actually was probably an exaggeration or an enhancement of what was being seen with patient samples we found when we started to work with participants on that. And the instrument manufacturer concerned made a major response, a very prompt response, and actually and changed their calibration protocols, because there clearly was a difference between the between instruments depending on what type of reagent preparation mode they were being used in. The next question, which got a couple of upvotes: why do we have to run EQA specimens in a QC mode when we're supposed to treat them as patient samples? I don't know if you want to take that first, Yvonne, and I can pick up on that, or shall I?
You could go first.
Well, I think the major problem is that material has to be stabilised. And interestingly, last year at a haematology conference, I wasn't presenting, but the presenter was actually from the Netherlands, and was presenting on coagulation EQA, in actual fact, and was asked by a representative of one of the major manufacturer groups, manufacturers, as to what is the point of haematology EQA. Now, the speaker, or the presenter, actually opted not to answer that, but spotted me in the audience and said, "I think Barbara can answer that one." It was too big a topic to answer in a single sort of question and answer session. Really took 2 minutes at the end of a presentation. But in actual fact, I have now volunteered to do another presentation, a full half-hour presentation, on the same international conference next year, on precisely that topic: what is the point of haematology EQA? Now, most of our audience here won't be able to attend, but I am going to be putting together a review article, which should be published as part of the conference proceedings on that topic, because this is one of the major questions, really. And I mean, the reason is that material has to be stabilized. As you will all be aware, you run EDTA samples that are a matter of 4 to 6 hours old, ideally. At most, you may run samples that are maybe 24 hours old if they've come from outlying clinics or GPs or what have you. But and there is a good reason for doing that, and that is that blood is a very fragile item. It's a very fragile product, and the cells will degenerate. So in order to have something that we can send round or can be used as an EQA material, the material has to be stabilized. There's 2 sources of doing that. We can either, for UK NEQAS, we stabilize it in-house for the full blood count, or we can buy commercially fully stabilized material, which is similar to IQC material. And I very much doubt many of you are running IQC in a patient's mode. It is possible, if you're running a very small, very local EQA program, to have fresh samples bled and send them out immediately by post, in which case they might get there within 24 hours. That is not feasible in a country even the size of the UK, yet let alone if we're doing if we have an international participant base. So we have to stabilize. The moment you stabilize material, you change the cell membranes, and that in particular will affect mainly white count, differential counting, automated differential counting, and probably also MCV and parameters that depend upon that. I'm of the opinion, when I look at the UK NEQAS data that comes back from with our full blood count material, that actually and most of that is run in patient mode, that we could actually put most of those, we could lose the instrument groups for things like hemoglobin, probably even white count, red count, because the CVs on the all method CVs are so low. The all method CVs for hemoglobin, for example, are typically around about 1.5%, 2% maximum, which to my mind means that the material is commutable for those parameters. But there will be other parameters such as MCV where this doesn't apply. So there is this sort of balance between providing a material that is as close as possible to a patient sample and stability that allows everybody to have the same chance in their EQA and to obtain equivalent results regardless of where they are located. That means we have to stabilize the cell membranes in some way. And I always say to people that if I could produce an anticoagulant product that stabilized fresh whole blood so that it performed exactly like fresh blood, and ship it all over the world, give it a lifespan of 3 to 4 weeks, then I probably wouldn't be doing my job, but I would have sold the patent on that and retired to the Bahamas by now. Or somewhere I could buy my own island. So that is one of the major problems. I think within UK NEQAS we come to a reasonable compromise, especially for full blood count, because we are at least able to send out the same material for every single the same material, same matrix, same analyte concentrations in the same round for every single machine, and that does give us some power, I think, in what we're looking at. So it's not an ideal situation. It's not an ideal situation, but it is a compromise. There are other things, there are other possibilities that are available, and I would, when I've written this review article, hopefully this will answer a few more questions and answer a few more, what are the benefits and what are the downsides and what are the alternatives for automated counting EQA and haematology. I hope that answers it. I don't know, Yvonne, if you wanted to add anything.
I was just going to add as well, because the commercial material, when we think of DL and some of our retic material, that is similar to your IQC material. And the machine, being as sophisticated as they are, knows the difference between patient whole blood and this commercially prepared material. So there's something with the algorithms and the gating on machines that actually it won't read it the same. If you put an EQA or IQC material through patient mode, it's not going to read it the same. So you're not going to get the accurate results or as accurate results as you would run it through the QC mode. And that's why we would say, especially for example, DL and the retic, some of the retic material, to run it through the QC mode so you do get the right results on them.
I would add as well about commercial material is that it is it's not necessarily just stabilized human blood. Obviously, most of it starts as human blood, but there may be other blood types in there from other animals that, for example, have nucleated red cells or what have you. And also, in some cases, there may be even just a particulate material, because they are formulations that are made to work on particular analyzers. They are extremely complex, the IQC and some of the EQA material that is used for things like automated counting. Those of you who attended our annual participants meeting the year before last will know that we did a little bit that was called about, EQA material, hurricanes and various other things. I can't remember the exact title, but that was because we had a delay to the delivery of some of the commercial EQA material that we buy. And the reason for that was we were told was that there were hurricanes in Florida, which is obviously a fairly common occurrence, as we know from recent news. But the background was we said yes, but you're the supplier, you are not in Florida, and they said yes, but the alligators that we bleed for this particular that form a component of this material are in Florida. So so it is, but they are very complex materials. So the okay, there is another question here, Yvonne, which you might like to take. Should we contact the manufacturers for a performance concern, or should we contact UK NEQAS first, which is a common question, isn't it? A common problem.
I mean, I am inclined to say contact UK NEQAS first, although at the same time, I don't have an issue with people contacting manufacturers first, because manufacturers, and we do, as myself and Barbara have said, we do have very close relationships with the manufacturers, and we have asked manufacturers to instruct participants to contact us if they do have performance issues. Now, and you can do this in parallel as well. It doesn't have to be do one and then the other. Now, the advantage of contacting the manufacturer is that they can look at your instrument printouts and help to satisfy you that actually, no, the machines are working as expected. Contacting us at UK NEQAS, we can look at your performance, as I said, over the last 6 specimens, last 3 surveys, to then satisfy you if there are any trends that we're noticing in your performance that you would then want to look at in line with how you are running samples and what you're doing internally within your labs. So there's kind of different things that we would both look at, and as I said, you can do them in parallel. But I think there is an advantage to contacting us both. And sometimes even if you contact us at UK NEQAS first, I may then contact the manufacturers because there might be some trends that I'm seeing that I actually just want to then get their advice on as well.
Yes, thank you, Yvonne. I would say that the manufacturers and us, we do talk to each other. We meet at least once a year with the major manufacturers just to catch up on various problems, various queries on each side. And if we note trends in performance, we do contact them in between times so that we can try to spot any performance issues early. The one thing that I would say about advice from manufacturers is that as a plea to participants, really, we would ask you please to follow the instructions that we provide in the instruction sheet until we change them. Some of the major problems we see with in individual laboratories' performance is that we may speak to a laboratory and they will say something like, well, we had the engineer in and he said we should run our EQA materials like this. Now, the engineer is trying to do his best. I mean, it's not a criticism of them. He's giving you the best advice that he can feel is available. But as Yvonne said quite early in her talk, one of the major problems and one of the major difficulties in actually sorting out performance issues is when participants are doing something different and we don't know about it, because we don't know if the trends we are seeing are down to different material handling or whether it's down to a problem with the machine or the technology.